Good morning, everyone, and welcome. My name is Lori Abinator. On behalf of Centralina at AAA Area Agency on Aging, it's my pleasure to welcome you and thank you for joining us today. Behind the scenes, operating all the technical things and helping monitor the chat is my counterpart from Centralina, Caton McElrath. Today's webinar is entitled Planning for the Road Ahead, Enhancing Drivers Safe Driving and Community Mobility Options. We have two wonderful presenters today sharing their knowledge with us. But first, we need to quickly cover some very brief announcements. First, you are in webinar mode, so you are automatically muted. You can see the speakers and the hosts, but you cannot see the other participants and they cannot see you. We will have questions and answers after both presenters have spoken. So if you don't want to forget your question, feel free to go ahead and put questions in the chat box if you would prefer, so that you don't forget. And lastly, the session is being recorded and will be available after today, and you'll be able to find that on our Centralina website. And you will receive a certificate of attendance via email for being with us today as well. So moving right along, it is my pleasure to introduce you to our first speaker. Crystal Robin is the Senior Research Associate at the University of North Carolina Highway Safety Research Center. She obtained her Master's of Social Welfare from UCLA and has a background in behavioral research on child passenger safety, occupant protection, older drivers, and novice drivers. Crystal's work centers around developing and evaluating behavioral approaches to transportation safety. She is a CarFit event coordinator and a certified child passenger safety technician instructor, educating parents on proper installation and use of child restraints. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Crystal.
Sorry, my mouse went to sleep and I needed to wake it up to unmute myself. Welcome, everybody. I'm excited to be here today to speak with you. I apologize if I have to cough throughout. I'm overcoming being sick and have still a little asthma flaring up. So apologies for that. So today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what the data shows with regard to population, who's driving, and crash trends in North Carolina, and then I'll hand it off to Dr. Dickerson to go deeper on driving itself. So next slide, please. So I'm going to start with just general population trends. I'm sure everyone is well aware, we've been talking about it for my entire life, that the US population is aging, the baby boomers are getting older. So we all understand this is happening, but it's nice to look at the data and see exactly what that looks like. Next slide. So this is for these data slides, I use the North Carolina projected populations. So these are from the North Carolina State Office of Budget and Management, and they are projections. So it's not necessarily accurate for today. It's what they anticipate it's going to be. So this first slide shows 3 different bars, each 10 years apart. And the bars represent the percentage of the population in North Carolina who will be in that 65 plus population. As you can see, it's growing, continues to grow, and we anticipate that to continue on through at least 2040, probably beyond. But you can see here maybe a slight decreasing, a decline or less rapid increase, I should say, as we move from 2030 to 2040. And you'll see why that is when we break it down by the different age categories, which if you can go to the next slide, we'll begin to do. So now I've taken those same 3 years, but divided it by different age categories, and it paints a very different picture. So what we see is that 65 to 74 age group is actually in 2040 expected to decrease. So it's peaking in around 2030, and then it's starting to come down. And what we're seeing in the older age groups is those are continuing to increase, especially in the 85 plus. That's not a surprise. As the baby boomers continue to age, they're going to age into higher age categories. So this is what we expect to see. It's just interesting to see it on paper. So where in North Carolina do our aging population reside? So if you can go to the next slide. I have a map of North Carolina here. Now, this is again projected in 2025. So that's basically roughly now where we're at. And what we can see is the number of older adults are heavily concentrated in our more urban counties. So that is Wake and Mecklenburg in those dark blue there. And in fact, according to the North Carolina Office of State Budget and Management, they expect the population of older individuals in these two counties to double in the 20-year period between 2041 or 2021 and 2041. So we're expecting a pretty rapid increase in those counties. But that only tells part of the story, because this is just raw numbers of where people live. But we know that those counties are also the most populated counties we have in the state. So the next slide breaks it down as a percentage of the population in that county. So this paints a very different picture. In fact, you can see that the more urban areas that were dark before are actually lighter now. And the darker areas tend to be more coastal, mountains, more rural. And what really stands out is down there in the southeast corner is Brunswick County. And in fact, as of this year, they are projected to have 41% of their population over the age of 65. As of 2022, they were noted as the oldest county in the state of North Carolina with a median age of 57. There's lots of theories on why that is, but one of the big things seems to be that there's been a migration of retirees to that area, such that the population growth in that county was 12%, the highest of any North Carolina county. And it's coastal, it's a little bit rural, but on either side, you've got Wilmington to the north and Myrtle Beach to the south. So probably lots of services that are available for an aging population while still having that quality of life of, kind of relaxed feel. So there's probably quite a draw to that area. I did want to dial in a little bit and look to the future for the Centralina area. So if you go to the next slide, I've fast forwarded to 2040 here, and you can see what's going on in the Centralina counties. The overall North Carolina is projected to have about 21% of its population be 65 and older. And you can see that the Centralina region is primarily either at or even below that state number, with the exception of Lincoln County, which is projected to have roughly 25% of their population in that 65 and older category by 2040. So next slide. So now I want to look at a little bit like, what does this mean? What are these individuals doing? Are they driving? Are they not? Are they retiring from driving? What does that look like? And before I get started on this, I do want to point out that in North Carolina, we don't have access to great data on drivers. We have crash data, we have population data, but not who's out there actually driving, who's maintaining their license. So for this section, I am looking at national data, but there is no reason to believe that North Carolina is so significantly different than the national trend that we can't at least draw some parallels. So if you'll go to the next slide, the first bit of data I looked at is from the National Household Travel Survey. And this is a survey that's done every few years, and I've looked at the last 3 years it was done here. And they actually ask people about their trips on particular days, why they went, things that may have impacted their ability to go where they wanted to go, how far they traveled, how long they traveled. And one of the things that it also asks is if they consider themselves a driver. And so what this is showing is who considers themselves a driver across these different age categories across time. And importantly, they define a driver as both those who identify as a driver, as describe themselves as a driver, or actually drove on the travel day that they were asking about. So it's either they've been proven to be a driver or they're claiming that they are still driving. And what we can see is, generally speaking, among all the different age categories, as we progress through time, a higher percentage of individuals are continuing to drive as they get older. So that is an interesting thing to look at. The other piece that we can look at here that tells a more, maybe in some ways more nuanced, in some ways less nuanced story is looking at who's maintaining their driver's licensing. And if you go to the next slide, that's what I looked at here. Now, One caveat here with driver's licensing. We know that people might hold their driver's license even when they stop driving. So it's not as though people decide, I'm going to stop driving today and get a ride down to the DMV and relinquish their license, right? Many people just let it expire naturally and just don't renew. So that's just one thing to keep in mind as we're looking at this data. So what we're looking at here is from 2022. It is from the Federal Highway Administration, and it's their highway statistics. And it's showing the percentage of individuals who are licensed. And you can see a gentle decline in the numbers until about 85 when it drops pretty notably. That isn't all that surprising to me, but what is surprising is if we look at this a little more nuanced by gender. So if you go to the next slide, we see a very different picture in what's going on. So men are on the left and women are on the right. Men, up until the age of really 85, are basically maintaining their licensure rates, and then it drops off. But still, in that 85 plus category, they're well over 85% of them are maintaining a license. Women, on the other hand, are generally dropping off with a very sharp decline at the 85 plus. So this is just a piece to keep in mind as you're working in your communities and thinking about the needs of your communities, that women may be disproportionately affected by no longer driving themselves and needing alternative ways to get around to stay engaged in their communities. Next slide, please. So now I'm going to go into the crash and fatal data, really wanting to look at, okay, if these individuals are maintaining their license longer, if the National Household Travel Survey data shows that they are actually not just maintaining, but they're actually driving longer, what does it look like on our roads? And now we're going to shift back to North Carolina because we have good data for this. So if you'll go to the next slide, perfect. This is overall crashes by age. And I looked, and it's a 5-year window, but I broke each year out individually, mostly because we had 2020 in there. So what you can see is, generally speaking, the first 3 sets of bars are people under the age of 64, and the last 3 sets are over the age of 64. What we see is people older than 64, 65 and older, are in fewer crashes. And there's a lot of reasons for that, but one of the big one is they're not driving as much. They're not putting as many miles on the roads, and the fewer miles you drive, the less likely you are to be in a crash because you're just not having the same exposure to that risk, right? So this is not an unusual trend. One thing that is particularly interesting is what happened in 2020. That's your second bar in each one of these. And you can see for every age group, it actually declined. So the number of crashes in 2020 went down, which is, again, part of the reason of that is reduced risk. People were not on the roads, so there were fewer crashes. It's what we expect to happen. What's particularly interesting is if we look at the next slide and shift to fatal crashes. So these are crashes where there was a fatality by the driver's age. And if we look at that second bar again in each of these, for those under the age of 65, fatal crashes actually went up, despite the fact that the number of total crashes went down. Good news is that did not happen for older drivers. And there's a lot of theories on why that happened, primarily being that there were fewer vehicles on the road, so drivers were going a faster speed. Higher speeds equal more fatalities. It's just physics. But we don't have that for the older population, unfortunately. And again, we see here that 65 and up are involved in fewer fatal crashes. That's good news. But that doesn't tell the whole picture. And so to understand it, we really have to put all of these things together. So if you go to the next slide, what we have here, now I've condensed all of those 5 years into just a single bar, just for ease of looking at this. We have all our different age groups, and what you can see is the bars are the number of fatal crashes. So those older age groups, we have fewer fatal crashes. We already know that. But based on the percentage of overall crashes that are fatal, that is what the orange line is. That's showing that if older drivers are in a crash, they're more likely to be fatally injured in that crash. So they're in fewer, but they tend to be more severe on their end. And in fact, those ages 85 and older are 4 times more likely to be killed in a crash than those younger people at 15 to 24. So that's a pretty notable increase in risk of fatality. And what that really comes down to is frailty and fragility. People who are older are more likely to be injured because that's just same with like having a fall. If you're younger, you're more likely to just pop up and maybe have a bruised or maybe a sprained ankle or a minor break or something. But if you're older, it can be catastrophic. Same thing for a crash. And if they are injured, they have a harder time overcoming those injuries. And so that really is something we would have to be concerned about. They're in fewer crashes, but they are more severe. So when we're thinking about driving safety, we want to try to do 2 things. We want to try to avoid being in crash at all. And we want to figure out how to help protect people when they are in a crash so that they are less likely to be seriously injured. Next slide. So this is my last slide, mostly because I didn't want to kill you with data. But I do think it's interesting. North Carolina is a very rural state. Even our urban counties have rural areas. So understanding what's happening, where these fatal crashes are, is important. And for this, I went ahead and combined the fatal and serious crashes. So what you have here are your blue bars are rural and your orange bars are urban. And this is the percentage of crashes that are fatal. And it's very clear that rural crashes are more likely to be fatal than urban crashes. And that trend is amplified for the 75 plus group. And what that really is likely a result of the frailty and fragility that we just talked about, as well as reduced access to medical care in urban areas. So that's both how long it takes medical personnel, first responders, to get to a rural crash site, as well as getting them to a hospital afterwards, as well as perhaps what the capacity of that hospital is in rural areas. We have speed on rural roads and other things that are also contributing to this. Another piece that I want you to think about as you're looking at this is that in rural areas, we typically have fewer transportation alternatives. And so individuals in these rural areas might feel more pressure to drive longer simply because they don't know how else to get around. So there's a lot of confounding things going on in the rural areas. So I just want you to keep those in mind as you're thinking about your communities and the transportation challenges that they face. And that is all I have today, but I'm happy to answer any questions at the end, but I'll pass it back to Lori.
Wonderful. Thank you, Crystal, for all of that great information today. And we definitely appreciate you sharing your expertise and setting the stage as we move to our second speaker. So let's meet our second speaker today. Dr. Ann Dickerson is a professor at East Carolina University's Department of Occupational Therapy and director of the Research for Older Adult Driver Initiative, and current editor of Occupational Therapy in Healthcare. Dr. Dickerson is an international leader in occupational therapy research in areas of older adults, driver simulation, and drivers with autism spectrum disorder, and driver rehabilitation. So we are fortunate to have you with us, and I will let you take it away from this point. Thank you, Dr. Dickerson.
Oh, right. It's delightful to be here. So I'm going to share my screen. Share and start my presentation. So, okay. So planning for the road ahead, driving and options for the future. So why is driving such an issue? And I remember giving a presentation much like what Crystal was saying, it's the crash rate for those over 85. So a law enforcement officer said to me, well, when they turn 85, why don't we just take their license away? And truly, that would solve the problem. I mean, it would decrease crashes. But the reality of it is we can't do that. Many older adults live in suburban and rural areas. We know that. And driving will remain the primary choice and personal mode of transportation. And we actually know by research, decision to stop driving has adverse consequences older adults want to age in their community, and that includes the rural areas, and they want and need to continue to drive to maintain health and quality of life. And I put this slide in here, and I'm just going to follow up with Crystal. It is very true that it's the frailty and fragility. It's not that 85-year-old means that they're not good drivers anymore, but they don't survive crashes. It just is, you know, even crashes at speeds of 31 miles per hour, you're going to have an increased risk with individuals with older adults. So what do we know about older adults? So, you know, this is when babies come into the world, they're all kind of the same. You know, they kind of look alike. They do the same thing. We know they're going to cry. We need to change their diapers. And so they're very homogenous. But with older adults, we are really talking about heterogeneous. Older adults are very different. And we cannot say one thing about and say that's true for all older adults, because over their lifetime, they change differently. What we do know, and that's that older drivers are generally safe drivers, and that was really reinforced with the statistics that Crystal showed. Because as one ages, drivers do tend to self-restrict. The first thing that happens as older adults will say, I'm not going to drive at night anymore. I'm just not comfortable. We all do age differently, but there is clear evidence with research with aging, you have slower processing speed. When it changes very differently with different numbers, but once you get into those 90s, you're going to see that slowed processing speed. And that really does affect driving. And the research also shows we outlive our ability to drive. For men, it's 6 years, and women 10 years. So that's the idea that if you live long enough, which is really great, you're probably going to outlive your ability to drive. So here's a model of who's in our community. And I see it conceptually as 3 different groups of people. So healthy community living older adults, that's where we all want to be. And there's lots and lots of retirees that are just moving around in the community, really enjoying their life. And I think there's a large proportion of individuals in that group. However, again, with age, you have processing speed decreases and increased number of medical conditions. So with aging, you're going to have, changes in motor, vision, and cognition. It's just a fact of life. Again, it's different for each person, but everybody does age. You can't, at 60, you can't do what you did at 40. And when you're 40, you can't do what you did at 20. So it just is part of that process of aging. And for some people, that aging process, the normal aging process, goes into this group called the medically at risk. And these are individuals that have medical conditions that put them at greater risk for driving safely. And I took out the slide there, but it's regardless of age. We certainly have a lot of young people that are medically at risk driver. And the challenge of the medically at risk driver is, how do we identify or test the medically at risk driver without over restricting our healthy older adults? And that is the real challenge that we all face, is making that decision. And it's important to understand that making sure that driving privilege is based on function, not age, through an evaluation of driving fitness. And that is what the stance of North Carolina's Department of Motor Vehicles, they believe, and they have a medical review board that really does make sure that that driving privilege is based on function and not age. So why is it so hard? Why is it so hard to tell individuals when they need to stop driving? And that's because of the idea of Mashon's hierarchy of driving behaviors. So there's three levels of driving behaviors. The bottom one, the most foundational one, is operational, and that's the human machine interaction. So when you think about driving as a novice driver, you have to learn how to control that vehicle. And it's really, you have to learn your motor planning on how much to put on the gas and how much to put on the brake. And what that does is become automatic. So many of you, if you drive somewhere, you drive every day, you don't even think about, you think about other things in the car. And sometimes you'll think, oh, I don't even remember getting here this morning. And that's because that operational becomes like riding a bike. So truly, no matter how someone's affected by dementia, you put them in a car and they can still drive that car because it is like riding a bike. On the next level is tactical, and these are the rules of the road. So you think, this is where new drivers have to learn all the rules, when to pass, when to, how far you stop at a stop sign, and following the rules of the road. And this is, again, a lot of this is internalized by older adults. You automatically stop at that stop sign without even thinking about it. And the top hierarchy is planning, wayfinding, and navigation. And so the strategic level is the highest level. And this is where really judgment comes in. So you look outside and say, oh, it's a great day, I'm going to go out and drive. And we know that bad weather's coming to North Carolina. So we're thinking, well, I'm going to change my plans for Wednesday or Thursday because I know that the weather's going to be bad and I'm not going to go out there. But it's not just the pre-planning, it's also the wayfinding and navigation. So I hear many times somebody saying, well, my mother only drives to the grocery store, or she only drives this far, he drives only this. But if there's a accident, if the road is being construction and they have to go a different way, they have to be able to navigate back. So that's where, when you hear that that silver alert, an individual that has been lost because they didn't find went down to Dixie Queen for breakfast and they got out of the car, they were had to go a different way, and then they can't strategically navigate themselves back. And what's important to understand is driving schools teach and test. So novice drivers, that's what they're doing. They're teaching them how to operate the car, and they're teaching them the rules of the road. And that's what the DMV tests, and it should. I mean, they're really making sure that that novice driver can handle the car and knows the rules of the road. But it's only when you do a medical fitness to drive that the individual that is doing that driving evaluation is measuring all three levels. And we do it through motor sensory and cognitive tests. So what is a fitness to drive evaluation? It's an evaluation of motor, vision, and cognition. It does include clinical assessments and then the on-road. And the important thing to understand is that there's no one test. Driving is very complex, and there is no one test that determines fitness to drive. And it's best done by a driving rehabilitation specialist who are occupational therapists. So why occupational therapy? That's what I am. We occupational therapists work in hospitals, rehab centers, private practice. And what we do is assist individuals with medical conditions with their everyday activities. And that's what driving is. It's an everyday activity. We help and plan interventions for individuals with cognition, physical, visual, perceptual impairments. And we also help them assist to drive after a medical condition interferes with their daily activities, such as a stroke. So strategies to plan for the road ahead. And one of the things is for those operational, if somebody has difficulty moving their neck because they have arthritis in their neck, It's getting mirrors that those what I want to call them fisheye mirrors to put on so that they can see their blind spot without having to move their head. Individuals that have a stroke and not no longer can use or had a amputation, there's hand controls that can be done. So when somebody has a medical condition that interferes with driving, it's not always a negative thing. They're an occupational therapist, driving rehabilitation specialist, or DRS, can find alternative ways. So I always say if there's some physical issue with somebody to driving, that's an easy fix. We have so much technology in our vehicles. And what can you do to reduce risk? What can you tell your clients to do is, and I think everybody knows this, is remain active. Move all those joints, do the strength and exercise. And I don't have the list of references here, but it's very clear from the CDC and from everyone is maintaining that strength and exercise, build a base of support, and certainly manage medical conditions through appropriate medications, diet, that kind of thing. For vision, you want to make sure people get their annual eye exams, sun protection of the eyes, manage, individuals with uncontrolled diabetes, uncontrolled blood pressure, it does affect vision. Now, the one thing that's important to understand for older adults is contrast sensitivity decreases with increased age. Contrast sensitivity is being able to see contrast. So when you are at dusk and in the morning, dawn, that's going to be the time where that contrast of someone on a bicycle in dark clothing, you're not going to be able to see them as well. And that's a contrast sensitivity decreases with increased age. That's a normal aging thing. So it's important to understand that, so that you might avoid driving in those time periods. Certainly optimizing the mirror settings is another way to help increase your visual acuity while you're driving. Now, the other thing that has really helped with tactical decisions, we all know this, roadway design and technology. It is not, we have known this for a long time of the older adults. And so there's been numerous, and I'm going to show some of these, roadway design and technology that has really helped all people be safer on the road. So many of these roadway designs have been designed for assisting older adults, but it assists everyone. Just look at we are seeing roundabouts popping up all over North Carolina, and this is a roadway design that is to slow down traffic. At first, it's, kind of, you have to understand how to use those roundabouts, but it's decreasing crashes, fatal crashes, particularly at intersections. It's a traffic calmer, so people will be continuing to drive, but it's, if there are crashes in a roundabout, they're usually minor crashes. And we know, we have many more protected left-hand turns, and that has certainly increased safety for everyone, as well as the controlled onto the highway. And then, of course, we have technology. When I talk to older adults, I say, if you can, buy what the highest level of technology you can afford. And I'm going to show you some statistics in a few minutes. There is, strong evidence that the technology is really saving lives. So another way to reduce risk, and this is where I believe, like I said, with physical, you can do, if there's a physical issue that decreases your driving, go see a DRS because they can probably solve it with technology or adaptation to vehicles. However, there is no really way to fix cognition in a vehicle. Of course, we could talk about driverless cars. That's where that will get to, but there's other issues there. But in terms of cognition, get enough sleep. Sleep and health are very connected. I want to say, if sleep apnea is probably one of the most diagnosed condition, and with sleep apnea, there's a clear connection to dementia. So when you have sleep apnea, you're not getting enough oxygen. It's a very easy fix with a CPAP machine. And, when you're tired, that's when you're going to be more at risk. So in addition to getting enough sleep, you need enough sleep that's undisturbed. And that's what sleep apnea is doing, is disturbing your sleep all night. You wake up tired and you drive tired and you fall asleep and you have a crash. But think of that, if your brain is not getting enough oxygen, cells die. And so there is a clear connection to dementia. So certainly if there's any question, get a sleep study. And again, it's a really easy fix. When you take new medications, you need to make sure that those medications aren't affecting your cognition and your ability to drive. Things like pain medicine. And I remember talking to a physician oncologist who said, and I never really thought, like people shouldn't be driving when they're on these strong medications for cancer, chemotherapy, and any medication. You really want to make sure that you are monitoring your ability to be aware and drive safely. And of course, there's lots of research showing that you need to keep your brain active. So in-vehicle technology, there's great progress in safety, comfort, and mobility. And there's two general categories. There's crash avoidance systems, and those are the ones that do lane departure, blind side warnings, forward crash warnings. And then there's advanced drive air assistance, and that's the navigational things, adaptive cruise control and adaptive headlights. If you have not driven, if you don't drive a car with some of these technology, it's a learning curve. There's no question about that. But I would say most of you probably have used navigation with your GPS or on your phone. Certainly it is clear using that in unfamiliar places will make you safer. And here's some ADS effects on relevant police reported crash rates. So what we see here, the gold is injury and the purple is all severities. And what you see is from forward crash warning, it decreases up to, between 20 and 30% of all severity of injury. Low speed auto brake, it's even greater. And the forward crash warning with auto brake saves the most lives. Lane departure saves lives, and the blind side. So this is decrease of crashes. And these are police reported crashes, but it only works if the person uses it. So for individuals that turn their lane departure off because it's beeping too much, think about that. There's a reason it's beeping, and use that technology and learn how to use it on your vehicle. And this is just what I want to, that last slide was from the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety. If you've never gone to their website, they have a lot of great information. They're the ones that do the crash testing. And the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety is supported by the insurance companies. They give the money to do the testing to improve safety. And when they do a crash test, they don't get the car that's sent from the automaker. They actually go out and buy a car off a lot because they want to have the cars that people buy. But just to show you this one video.
Blind spot detection systems use sensors that monitor nearby lanes and determine when other vehicles approach or enter a vehicle's blind spot. When this occurs, the system warns the driver with a visual alert, which usually appears either in or near the side view mirror. If the driver signals a turn or lane change, the alert changes. It may become brighter or flash, or an audible warning may sound. Some systems also may activate brake or steering controls to keep the vehicle in its lane. The alert stops when the adjacent vehicle is no longer in the blind spot.
So if you ever have questions about any of the technology, that is really a great place to go to for it. And another website that is really an outstanding resource is My Car Does What. And they have similar kind of information, forward collision warning, for example. They have a quick guide of how it works. And they have videos, they have question and answers and resources. So if there's anything, I still have questions about my vehicle and how something works, but this is again a great resource. My Car Does What, because when you buy a car with technology, it's not necessarily intuitive. You really do need some training and understanding, and this is a super website to go to for that information. So I'm going to switch a little bit here. Common crashes in older adults are parking lots. So there's really so one of the best technology is that backup warning on two sides of the vehicle and the rear, because they're going to tell you when there's other things behind you. Of course, now all vehicles after 2013 have to have backup cameras. Some are better than others. Rear end collisions are also another really common crash. Again, remember to keep your spacing. And I have a picture here of when you are behind somebody, look for those tires on the road, and that tells you what's the appropriate space. If you can't see their tires, you're too close. And if you see so much more of the road, you're also too far away. And then people think they can get in between. So you're actually safer right when you're in this, the sweet zone of how close to be. Merging is another, with older adults, that's another unsafe. That's where a lot of the crashes are for older adults. Certainly use your turn signal. Mirror changes, you can change your mirrors and send them out, and you can find those mirror changes on AARP's websites, AAA websites. And again, that line spot change technology is really a worthwhile invention. And certainly turning across a path of a vehicle. So as you get older, again, I've talked about your processing speed changes. One of the worst places is to be in a yield, because you feel the pressure that you should be going, and you're looking and other people are assuming that you're going to yield to them. And that's where that processing speed can really affect an older adult. So another way to keep safer is to avoid unprotected left turns. So use where there's lights, where there are those channeled roads that you can use to turn and and turn left when the light is green, or make 3 right turns and then you avoid that left turn. I think one of the other things that, I've been driving 50, 60 years. And we all have bad habits. And so this is just one of the things that we tend to do when we drive is on this case on the top, we have this green car. They're making a right turn and they know that they're gonna turn left, up, up the street. So they turn right into that left-hand lane. And this car going left, it knows that they want to be in this lane, so they turn immediately and go into their far left lane. But in fact, this is the North Carolina has the correct turning lane. So by law, you should be turning into your nearest lane, then using your blinker to change lanes. The same here as when making a left turn, you should be turning into your nearest lane. So, but everybody does go into the wrong lane. And so even though the law says that, and you would be at risk if you had a crash, but here's what could happen. We know that people often this person here is looking down here. He sees that there's a right turn on, he has a red light, but he's looking and because he can turn right on red. So he's looking to turn into this lane but he's not looking over at this yellow car. So the same thing happening here. So this is where that collision could happen if you turn into the far lane. So if you get one thing today, that's watch for your bad habit of going into the wrong lane, because it can be at a busy intersection. Again, this car is looking to turn. This car is seeing that this car is turning. They may not be watching for the car turning right on red, or this car is expecting the blue car to keep in their lane, and if they're turned wide. So this is the reason that you really need to stay in the correct turning lane. So strategic. Well, how can we improve strategic? Certainly using GPSs, a GPS. Now, certainly somebody that goes to the same place all the time isn't necessarily going to turn on their GPS. However, whenever you're going to somewhere unfamiliar, it is critically important to use your GPS. And I was part of a study that showed everybody drove better using GPS, even if they were not familiar with using it before. So planning always helps. That wayfinding navigation. And when you start to notice that somebody is getting lost, and taking longer to go to the store and come back because they might have turned off a route and they kind of wander back and just happen to get back, that's like a major sign of it may be time to be evaluated at the very least. So, transportation planning. I'm going to show a video here.
Our generation, we were rebels. We broke the rules. We made change.
We made history, and we're all about peace, love, and rock and roll.
Oh, how we loved our cars. They were fast and loud. We went wherever the wind blew us.
Even when we grew up and had kids, we were the youngest generation for our age. We refused to grow old. We're still the life of the party.
We're still making our mark.
So the key is to stay one step ahead on this journey. Plan for retirement.
Live large and check those things off your bucket list. Be safe, but don't play it too safe.
And know when to take the high road, when to leave the driving to someone else.
I prefer to have a driver anyway.
We're lucky to be living in a time when technology can help us maintain our independence.
Ride-sharing apps are here. Driverless cars are coming. There are more options now than ever before.
So just like you planned for retirement to live the life you want, having a transportation plan can help you get to the places that help you live that life you want. Fatal car crash rates can increase for those over 75. and even a fender bender could cause a disabling injury given aging bones and increased frailty. So give some thought to when you're ready to turn over your keys for your own safety and for the safety of others.
So create a transportation plan like I did.
I set my keys straight.
I parked my car for good, but I'm still in the driver's seat.
I've got more places to go and people to see.
I'm just getting started.
Plan for the road ahead. See how to make your transportation plan at planfortheroadahead.org.
So that's I want to talk about Plan for the Road Ahead. This was a grant. Oops, sorry. Let me go back here. From National Highway Traffic Safety Administration to ECU and to North Carolina to help improve older driver safety. So this is websites dedicated to older adults for planning transportation. And I will really say that I think that just like retirement, you do have to plan for your transportation. Many older adults, and we see them moving to Wilmington, but many are moving closer to family, are downsizing from their big house to a smaller house. I think your driving retirement plan needs to be along those lines. You don't want to wait until there's a crash. You really do want to start planning and learning how to use other types of transportation. So how does, on this website, it is a dedicated website. You're not going to see things popping up for buying anything. There's no alternative mode here. There's a place where how does aging affect driving? So there's information about sensory and physical changes, cognitive changes, and especially on dementia. One of the other things, come on. Right. Why isn't I? There we go. Nope, now I went too far. So on this website, there are places, how's my driving? So these are, you can assess your skill level. And it also talks about, when I was talking about the 3 levels of driving ability, there's a discussion about that. What's the difference between driving skills and driving fitness? So driving skills are the things that you have learned as an older adult for years and years. Driving fitness has to do with your vision, cognition, and physical. This is a section on warning signs, and it has some very good documentation of what to look for when you're thinking about someone or your own driving or other people's. And then assessing your readiness for community mobility, and I'm going to talk about that in 1 second. So here is the 3 research-based assessment tools. There's lots of assessment tools out there. Many of them are not evidence-based. That means that they're not researched behind. There's not any research to show that they are really aligned with driving skills and driving fitness. These are 3 self assessments that you can go to. You can click on any of the 3. It will take you off of this site, but these are all free assessments. So it's one place to go for evaluating somebody's skill. I did say, there's another section from the pros. This is an occupational therapy and driving rehabilitation specialist. There are a lot of other individuals that may call them a driving rehabilitation specialist. You want to make sure that you get someone who is an OT, and that is because OTs learn how to look at activities and understand how people interact with their daily tasks, whether they have with whatever kind of disability they have. And that's why someone who doesn't have that medical knowledge is not going to be able to assist effectively. So now, the other thing that's on the website, this is an assessment for the readiness for mobility transition. This is a free tool. I was so fortunate when we were building this website that the researchers allowed us to use this tool for free. So it's the idea of people react to change differently. And so this questionnaire is based on research. It was designed to measure your emotional and attitudinal readiness to cope with present and future changes in the mobility. So it's an online test. You answer these questions, and then what comes up, your score. Once you put that data in, the score will come up, and the score here, it says high readiness to drive. That's what this particular score is. There's mixed readiness is 55 to 85, and then low readiness. So if you find which of these, you click on that, and then it comes out. So this is the PDF that comes out for someone if we wanted to look at low readiness, and it explains what the assessment tool does, what the scores mean, and questions for consideration and discussion. So those of you that are caregivers, or work in the community with older adults, you can use this tool and talk with them and ask them the questions. And this is the information about the research and what that is based on. So there's also an interactive transportation plan, and there's 19 topical errors in 3. And what it does is they ask you right where to go. What do I need to do? How often do I go there? Do you know other people that can take you? And is there anywhere else? And it actually, again, it's an online practice form, and I'm going to actually show it to you right here. So it's make a transportation plan, and it's so you can see that the plan is right there. The grocery store is first. How often do I go there? How far is it from my home? Do I know other people that could take me there? And then you can write in who that might be. So Susie can take me, and then it will go on to the pharmacy. How many times a month? You know, how far is it? And so on. I'm going to go forward, but you get the idea that you can fill this out, and then if there's an icon for a PDF, you can print it out. It does not save it. And again, other people won't be seeing your plan, and you can change it as you want, but then you print it out and can do as many plans as you want. So one of the other issues is people say, well, it's too expensive to take Ubers. It's too expensive to do a taxi, but cars aren't cheap. And so this is a savings calculator. Again, it's right online. You can work through it. So it's the idea of, okay, how much does your car cost? So it gives the daily distance of 32 miles an hour, what the vehicle mileage is. So some vehicles are very economical and others aren't. The price of gas. Now we don't have this with the cost of plugging it in, so I apologize for that. But we include parking tolls, a car payment if they're still making a car payment, certainly car insurance, and number of days they're driving in a month. Have it's a little sensitive with that car insurance. Number of days they drive every day, and then maintenance cost. And then you can see there what that monthly expense is. So you can get an awful lot of taxi drivers with $629 a month for the car. Okay. Resources to help driving older drivers. I would absolutely say we have to start in viewing transportation planning as a transition. It is not something that, unfortunately, we see it a lot with driving evaluations, fitness to drive, is there is a car accident, and it's, or the person, we know that they have dementia, and there are ways that we can make a transition plan with early dementia. People with early dementia can still drive, but they do need to start making this transition. So these are resources for healthcare professionals, conversation starters. The Hartford books there's a whole variety of books, and frequently asked questions. And this is just some other websites, experienced driver websites that I think are very good. Stay Independent, Find Your Mobility Plan is from the CDC. That's an excellent way. It's beyond driving. It's about being mobile. The Clearinghouse for Older Road User Safety. How can an occupational therapy help? Affordable Rides Without a Smartphone is Google Grandparents, and Looking for Transportation Ride Insight is a national organization for driving specialists. So I'm going to say thank you. And I do want to say, for those of you that do try to help older adults, those videos that are on this website, so the video I showed you is on this website. You are free to use that. This is was paid by federal dollars, so feel free to download that video. If you need me to contact me, this is my contact information. I'll be glad to give you the access to that. And I just want to say there are some other films coming. If you contact me, I can give you those links to. We have a very 12-minute film about an older woman who is being evaluated for driving problems. So I am excited to now, I'm going to end my presentation and stop sharing and answer questions and have a great discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dickerson. That was great information, of course, and I'll zip back, retro back over to Crystal as well. From both of you, that was terrific information. And like you said, let's open it up for questions, see what other what questions folks have after all of that great information. And you can put your questions in the chat, or if you, is there a way for them to speak their questions, Caitlin, if they prefer that way?
No, they can go in the chat or the Q&A.
Okay,
I think I
chat
just
or
saw
Q&A.
one come in.
Okay. Let's see, got a question. How often are seniors required to be retested, or is it based on post-accident or doctor recommendation?
That's an excellent question. And I think in North Carolina, I think it's like 10 years, but once you turn 66, it goes down to 5 years. But you still do it online. I don't, with crashes, crashes are rare. So but there are sometimes it's a medical condition. So it will be up to the law enforcement officer on the crash to decide that there was a medical issue, and then he is able to write a report that is sent to the medical review, and then the person, if it was an older adult and they felt it was a medical condition, they'll get a report from the DMV telling them they need to go to their physician, and the physician will answer questions on whether he feels or she feels that this person may need to be evaluated. Anyone can report somebody. There's a form on the DMV website. I don't know that many people do that. I'm doing a lot of, and as Crystal's, we're doing a lot of education for law enforcement officers, because they're the feet on the ground. And so when they see someone, and we have all seen the person that is going down the wrong lane. I just recently, twice in 1 week, I saw there was a green light for left-hand turn and someone going through the red light And that, you know, there was not a crash. And I think, you know, sometimes it's somebody who's not paying attention. Young people do make mistakes like that. But if it's someone who has dementia, that may happen because they see the green light. And so a law enforcement officer may pull them over, and we do have, we need to train our law enforcement. In fact, I know that there is some NHTSA is coming out with national video 2-hour education for law enforcement to pull that person over and make sure they identify them to the medical review board in that state. There's also education going to be for the driver license agency. So when someone comes in, they'll ask some pointed questions, and they will have the ability to then decide whether that person needs to get evaluated. So no one is taking away the license, only the DMV can do that. It's really important so that the person go to their physician, go to their primary care provider, and talk with family. You know, in my opinion, it's when somebody gets a diagnosis of any progressive type of disorder, they should start thinking about transportation, and that's what everybody avoids to the last minute. I mean, they'll say, no, we don't trust them to, do their medication. We don't trust them to do their money anymore. We're going to do that now. But then they let them drive. Driving is the most complex IADL. It should be the first thing you talk about as that transition. So you want to avoid today, tomorrow, we're taking away your license. You want to do it over a period of time and make it a transition. So that was a long answer, but excellent question.
Before we move on to the next question, I'm going to interject with an additional question of mine just as a follow-up. Do you hear, because I have heard this, physicians who respond to their patients who say, I'm not going to be the one to make that judge. And so they leave that, folks, families or clients will go and say, I need you to tell me whether I'm allowed to drive or not. And then physicians say, I'm not the one to do that.
You know, it's really, there's a lot of reasons. We try to educate physicians too, but they don't learn, and that's why I'm emphasizing about the occupational therapist. So a physician doesn't have the expertise. Certainly, I believe that physicians that deal with dementia all the time, they know that period, but primary care providers aren't necessarily trained. There are some screening tools that they should be using, but we know, and also physicians don't want to destroy that patient-family relationship. But I think most physicians will tell you, primary care providers will say, the family members, tell her she can't drive. Tell her they can't drive. And we really need to help family members. And that's why we need to, it's sort of, if you see the problem, say it, bring it up. This shouldn't be a secret and say, God, just avoid so-and-so. There are people that can help. If there's any questions about daily life skills, it needs to be a conversation. And that's why I emphasize that website. There is strategies there, what to do. And there are other websites too, that have those helpful guidance. Did that answer your question?
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I just want to jump in and say one of the other challenges in North Carolina specific is referrals to medical review are not confidential. So medical providers may feel, to Aaron's point about not wanting to destroy that relationship, if the driver asks who reported them, the DMV will give them that information. So some states do it differently, but that is a North Carolina thing.
Interesting. I'd not heard that before.
They try not to give it, but if they can't, they will give it. And the other thing, I know when I was presenting to physicians, they'll say, I don't say anything because I don't want to be legally prosecuted. But in fact, thinking about it, they're safer saying to the client, you need to get evaluated, you need to consider this, because if you don't say anything and they go out and kill somebody, you know, if they killed my child and they knew it was a dementia, you know, I think they're more at risk by not saying something. But, and that's true for, you know, I'm helping the American Occupational Therapy with guidance to OTs, because we see them in the kitchen, we see them doing their daily task, and we tell OTs they need to say something. No, they're not able to do driving. And it may be like, a stroke is a great example for when an individual has a stroke, they shouldn't be driving, but they get better. And so it's not that that's driving's taken away forever. There are things we can do depending on their recovery.
Great point. Next question I see, how often is the DMV handbook updated? Concerned that with the new traffic calming technology infrastructure, like a roundabout, that anyone, not just seniors, don't understand what it means or how to navigate. Similar concerns about navigating around cyclists.
Those are great questions. And, you know, I think Crystal and I have struggled. I mean, I tell the engineers, you know, when you do something new, you need to educate people. And I think that's, there's a highway safety plan, and that's part of that plan. I do think we need to have some more public training for some of the new ways of managing traffic. I think there are. I mean, I think if you Google that, there are lots of resources, but it's knowing what to Google and where to look. And every state is a little different, but I certainly do presentations about some of those ways of negotiating that.
So I think there's a couple things there. Dr. Dickerson and I don't work for DMV, so we're not going to speak for them on how often they update their manual. But I will say, to Dr. Dickerson's point, the manual, the DMV manual, is probably the least effective way for anybody to learn anything. And we just know that from learning. Like, we just can't hand someone a manual and tell them, now go ahead and take your engine apart and put it back together. Right? Like, you need to experience it. You need to get out there and do it. And so videos, things like that are probably going to be more effective, actually, like showing what it is and how it works. But the challenge is we cannot rely on people to go seek the information themselves. They won't know what to Google, and most people just aren't going to. And so we have to figure out how to get the information to them in a way that they can consume it. And I would argue that the DMV manual is probably the least effective way to do that. But certainly, you know, they should be covered in those things, but we shouldn't rely on that.
I do know that there are safety classes, given by AARP, AAA. I think senior centers sometimes have, sessions. I think there are a variety of ways.
It's a great thought as well. Next question, do you all give these presentations at senior centers or in the community? If so, where? And kind of a tag along question to that is, how do we get a copy of the presentations?
I will admit that I try not, this is going to be recorded, so I think, you certainly watch it, and I try not to give out too many of my presentations, but I have spoken at many senior centers. And so, and I'm assuming Crystal has too, but I'm always willing to come. I'll be in Wilmington, I think. I'm going to be in Centralia's at their conference in March, and I'll be in Wilmington. I've been at Chapel Hill, so I'm always delighted to meet with older adults and to share my information. And different kinds of presentations, so.
And ditto, I'll go out to senior centers and community centers. Typically, it's just invite. Send me an email, and if we can make the schedule work, I'll come out. I obviously don't go over all the data with the general public because that's not really what they're there for, but I do presentations on things that they might be noticing as they're aging and things that they can do to continue to stay safe, and things that if they have concerns, how they can go about addressing those things.
Wonderful.
And I'm happy to share, if you want the data slides, I'm happy to share those with you. That's not a problem. They're things that I put reports and whatnot.
Question about where you'll be presenting in Wilmington, Dr. Dickerson.
Oh, I'm trying to remember. I know I'm going to be speaking next week with the Duke at the Duke Dementia Group. And Wilmington is gosh, it's the area AHEC. That's what it is that I'll be speaking. They'll have an area AHEC conference in Wilmington. It's called CPAC. So that's sorry about that, and I'm not sure when it is. It's either March or April. Sorry. I wish I really have to keep a calendar because I have to keep track of. And if you come to I have a website on ECU, so you can Google my name, or Roady, Roadi. I have some videos there that are really useful. And this is what I was talking about. The Governor of Highway Safety has been supporting some filmmaking, which are kind of fun ways of learning the information. So those are posted on that. Or if you contact me directly, I can give you links.
Great. I don't see anything else unless I missed something. Dr. Dickerson, I do have a question for you. The majority of what you showed towards the end, that was all from the plan for the road ahead.com.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's also .net. It has 2 domains that'll take you to the same place.
Okay. That was wonderful information that anybody who works with older adult clients could certainly share.
Yeah, and like I said, the videos there's 2 videos on there. The other video is more of a fun video. It shows a middle-aged woman talking about the driver and her teenage son sitting there. So you all think about it's her son she's talking about when she's talking about her father. So that's
Terrific. Any other questions? I want to give everybody a chance, but don't want to hold us if we are out of questions.
See anything coming through, Lori? Do you want me to share the transportation guide slide?
Yeah, if you would, before we close, we would love to draw your attention to one resource that we have at Centralina. And this is our transportation guide, and it actually just went to print for our 2.0 version. It's at the printers as we speak. So certainly it'll be out in the region soon. If you've not seen it already, this is a guide that's in both English and in Spanish. It has specific information about services that are in our 9 counties in the Centralina region. But for those of you who are outside the region, it still has some great information to reference no matter where you are, work or residential. Has information about driving as safely as possible, which was our whole reason for being here today. And not just as safely as possible, but also as long as possible, and remaining safe. It has a lot about ride sharing information, about how to use Lyft and Uber and GoGo Grandparent. For a lot of older adults, that's one of the things that holds them back, is how to use those services. talks about a transportation plan, much along the lines of what we just saw with Dr. Dickerson sharing that video and assessment tools. It has a driver agreement form, which is similar to a healthcare power of attorney where we make our medical desires known. This is a form that's just about driving, saying if I get to that point where driving may not be a safe consideration anymore, this is my trusted person that I want to have that conversation with me and make sure we're exploring all the alternatives before I give that up. So that is an additional thing that we have added in the 2.0 version. So this is available online on our website, Centralina Area Agency on Aging. You can Google that, or it's also in the information you get via the emails that we send out. So just wanted to mention that. And then lastly, our conference that's coming up, Dr. Dickerson is one of our presenters at that, but it's on March 28th. We are tackling aging this year, and we have a great keynote speaker who's going to be sharing with us as well. His name is Brad Allen, and if you don't know Brad Allen, this will be a great opportunity to get to know him, and he's wonderful. So without any further questions or anything, just want to thank everyone for joining us today. I believe we might be in between you guys and lunchtime, so we don't want to hold anybody up too much. But thank you. And again, I know everyone will join me in one last round of thank yous to both Dr. Dickerson and to Crystal for sharing their expertise with us today.
Thank you very much. And I will say that my presentation, I'm going to make it a little different. So, it will be new and exciting. So thank you so much.
So those who are coming to our conference will get even more great information. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, and so long. We will see you guys next time.